I got out of the hospital to find my dog sold, my room turned into a gym, my journals in the trash, and my brother flexing on a $5K bike he bought with my disability checks. So I emailed his employer with photos of his theft receipts and medical fraud when I got out of the hospital in Tacoma. Still weak, still sore, still trying to understand how the last 3 months of my life had vanished into IV drips and fluorescent lights. The first thing I saw was my brother's brand new motorcycle parked in my old spot in my parents' driveway. I remember staring at it, swaying on my crutches, thinking maybe I was hallucinating again. The thing gleamed like he polished it every morning. I knew immediately he'd used my disability payments to pay for it, because he'd bragged for years about how someday he'd get a real bike, not the Craigslist garbage. But seeing it wasn't even the worst part. Inside my room, the one room in that house that ever felt like mine, was gone. Not messy, not rearranged. Gone. My brother had turned it into a home gym like he'd been waiting his whole life for me to disappear. Dumbbells stacked where my dresser used to be. A bench press where my bed had sat for 10 years. The walls repainted. All traces of me erased. My dog, Milo, the only creature who'd sat with me through every panic attack, every surgery, every lonely night, wasn't there either. When I asked, my brother shrugged like he was telling me the weather. Sold him, you weren't coming back anyway. Like that was a normal sentence to say, like it made sense. Like it didn't feel like he'd reached inside my chest and ripped something out with his bare hands. I asked about my journals, the ones I'd kept since I was 12, the only record I had of everything I'd survived. The ones I wrote in every night before my accident. My mother wouldn't even look at me when she said, "He tossed them. He needed the closet space. Don't make a big deal out of it." I stood there, gripping my crutches so hard I thought they might snap, staring at two people who had raised me, fed me, told me they loved me. And they just shrugged. Like losing my dog, my things, my money, my entire life was some minor inconvenience compared to my brother's need for a fresh start. And when I told them he'd emptied my disability payments, money I needed for physical therapy, they said, "Be grateful he didn't take your car too. Be grateful." I had spent months in a hospital bed fighting to get my body working again, fighting to remember basic things, fighting to stay alive. And the people who were supposed to have my back acted like my survival was a burden. I would have collapsed right there if I hadn't forced myself to stay upright. When I asked where I was supposed to sleep, my mother waved vaguely toward the couch, as if I wasn't still recovering, as if sleeping on a sinking old sofa wouldn't undo half the progress I'd made. My brother walked by, smirking, and slapped the key to his motorcycle against his palm like he was daring me to say something. "Tough luck," he said. "Next time don't almost die." That was the moment something inside me went cold. Not angry, not hurt, just frozen. A part of me shut down because if I felt even a fraction of what was boiling under my skin, I would have screamed until my throat tore open. I had no room, no dog, no money, no support. Nowhere to go, no one left to call. But I wasn't helpless. And when my brother left for work the next morning, bragging again about how untouchable he was at his job, I opened my laptop. I pulled up the photos I'd taken the night before. The ones that showed exactly what he'd been hiding for years. The ones that could ruin him in one email. I typed his employer's address into the to line. Then I attached the photos. And hit send. Before everything fell apart, before the accident, before the hospital tubes and the fight to relearn how to walk, my brother and I used to at least pretend to be close. We grew up in a small house in Lakewood, outside Tacoma, where the walls were thin and the arguments were loud. Our parents weren't cruel. They were just tired, broke, and always one inconvenience away from snapping. My brother, Aaron, was the golden child by default. He wasn't smarter or kinder. He was just louder, pushier, and better at making them feel guilty when he didn't get his way. I learned early that keeping the peace meant letting him take whatever he wanted. If I protested, my parents would sigh and say, "Just let him have it. You know how he gets." That one sentence might as well have been the motto of my childhood. You know how he gets. Translation, don't make problems, don't stand up for yourself, don't expect fairness. Survive. Still, I never imagined he'd go as far as he did, stealing my money, throwing away my journals, selling my dog. That level of cruelty didn't happen all at once. It built slowly, over years, in tiny steps that everyone shrugged off. When I was 16, he totaled my bike, and my parents told me to stop being dramatic. When I was 19, he borrowed my savings and never paid me back. When I was 21, he got a DUI and blamed me for not picking him up fast enough, and my parents agreed I should have tried harder. Each time, I swallowed the anger because fighting back only made my life harder. But things started shifting 2 years ago, after I adopted Milo. Milo wasn't just a dog. He was my anchor. He was the first thing in my life that felt truly mine. I trained him, walked him every day after work, fed him, cared for him. Milo made me feel like I wasn't alone. Even when everything else was chaos, Milo was steady. Aaron hated him from day one. He sheds everywhere. He gets in my way. He's ruining the house. He likes you more than me, what's that about? He said it jokingly, but not really. Then there were the disability payments. Those started after my accident. An idiot driver ran a red light in downtown Tacoma and slammed into me. I woke up days later, barely recognizing my own body. I lost months of work, savings, independence. The payments were the only thing keeping me afloat while I went through therapy. Aaron saw them as free money. He treated them like they belonged to the family, and by family, he meant him. My parents wouldn't confront him about anything, because he'd throw tantrums or guilt-trip them about how hard his life was. Meanwhile, I was the one actually fighting to recover, to walk, to get back to something resembling normal life. When I was in the hospital, I kept imagining coming home to Milo's happy barking and collapsing into my bed like it was a place of safety. I imagined my parents helping me settle back in. I imagined my brother maybe showing the smallest bit of concern. But when I got discharged, all of that hope dissolved the second I walked into the house and saw what he'd done. Looking back, maybe the signs were always there. Maybe I should have known the second my parents said, "Don't worry, Aaron will handle things while you're gone," that things would go wrong. But I didn't think he'd take everything. I didn't think he'd erase me. And I definitely didn't think I'd ever reach the point where ruining him professionally felt not only justified, but necessary. The morning after I emailed his employer, I woke up on that awful couch feeling like someone had poured concrete into my spine. Every muscle burned. My legs throbbed. I could feel the swelling through the thin blanket. My parents moved around the house like I was an unwanted guest overstaying my welcome. No one asked how I slept. No one asked how my pain was. They just kept saying things like, "Don't start anything today," and "Let's keep the peace." Keep the peace. As if I hadn't lived my entire life being quiet so other people didn't get uncomfortable. Aaron came downstairs around 10 a.m., shirtless, sweaty from working out in what used to be my room. He tossed a towel on the arm of the couch, right next to my face, and said, "Hey, don't sit around all day. The laziness is what got you stuck in the first place." I gripped my crutches hard enough that my fingers tingled. If I reacted, if I snapped, if I even breathed wrong, he'd turn it into proof that I was the problem. That was his specialty, making sure everyone saw me as the fragile, dramatic sibling while he played the misunderstood victim. He didn't know about the email yet. I watched him swagger around like he was untouchable, like the world would always bend for him. That arrogance had fueled every bad thing he'd done, and it was about to bite him. But revenge doesn't erase pain. Not right away. And that day, I felt all of it crashing down on me at once. I kept trying to call the shelter, hoping Milo might have ended up there. No luck. I tried texting a few friends, but months in the hospital had made me disappear from people's lives. I couldn't blame them, but each unanswered message felt like another door closing. At one point, I limped into my old room just to stand in the doorway and take in the damage. The floor mats, the weights, the obnoxious posters of bodybuilders, the faint chemical smell of fresh paint. I opened the closet hoping that maybe some of my journals were still there. Nothing. He even threw away the shoebox where I kept birthday cards from people I'd loved. I didn't cry. I felt something worse, a numbness I'd never felt before. It was like the part of me that used to believe in family had gone offline. Around noon, Aaron left for work, revving his motorcycle so loudly the neighbor's baby started crying. My parents barely looked up. My mother just muttered, "He's stressed." My father said, "Don't provoke him, he's been under pressure lately." Under pressure. As if I hadn't been in a hospital bed learning how to walk again. I spent the afternoon quietly gathering what little I still owned. Some clothes in a laundry basket, my phone charger, a few documents I'd kept in my old backpack. Every object I touched made me realize how thoroughly my brother had stripped me down to nothing. But around 4 p.m., something finally shifted. I heard my brother's motorcycle pull in, much earlier than usual. The engine cut abruptly. The front door flew open. Aaron stomped inside, his face red, his jaw clenched so tight he looked almost deformed. He threw his helmet across the room. It hit the wall with a crack. "Who the hell emailed my boss?" he yelled. My parents jumped like startled animals. My father stuttered something about calm down, but Aaron wasn't looking at him. He was staring at me, not suspicious, not guessing, certain. And that fearlessness he'd always had, that belief that nothing bad could ever stick to him, was gone. For the first time in years, Aaron looked scared. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known yet, was that the email wasn't the only thing I'd done. Not by a long shot. Aaron stood there in the living room, chest heaving, sweat still rolling down his neck from whatever panic-fueled ride he'd taken home. My parents froze like statues, waiting for me to apologize, to fix whatever mess Aaron had created for himself. That was the pattern. He caused chaos, I absorbed the blame. But not this time. His voice cracked when he yelled, "You think you're smart? You think you can ruin my career?" He was trying to sound angry, but it came out shaky. Desperate. For once, the mask didn't fit. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because that email wasn't just a complaint. It wasn't a rant or an emotional outburst. It contained photos, clear, time-stamped, undeniable photos, of my brother doing the one thing he had spent years lying about. He'd been stealing from his employer, and not small stuff. Thousands. Inventory, tools, company equipment, resold for cash, pawn shops, Craigslist apps. I knew because I'd caught him doing it 2 years earlier. He'd gotten sloppy, leaving things in our garage, bragging drunk to his friends about how corporate idiots never check anything. I took pictures back then, not because I planned to use them, but because I didn't trust him. Some part of me must have known this day would come. At the time, I confronted him quietly, thinking maybe he'd be scared enough to stop. Instead, he got in my face and told me, "If you ever say a word, I'll make your life hell, and Mom and Dad will believe me over you every damn time." He wasn't wrong. So I stayed quiet. I tucked the photos away. I kept my distance. Until he sold my dog. Until he stole my money. Until he erased me from the house like I'd died. When Aaron realized what those photos meant, what they'd already done, his anger shifted into something darker. Something unstable. "You don't get it," he said, stepping closer. "I could go to jail, do you understand that? Jail, you think that's funny? You think that's revenge?" My mother put a hand on his arm like he was the victim. "Aaron, calm down. Your boss is probably just confused. We can fix this." "No, we can't," he snapped. "They suspended me on the spot. They're launching a full investigation. They want me to come in tomorrow with a union rep." Then he turned to me again. "What did you write? What else did you send?" I kept my voice steady. "Just the truth." He lunged toward me, not a warning step, not a bluff. A real, full-speed, rage-fueled lunge. My father grabbed him, but it barely slowed him down. The only reason Aaron didn't get his hands on me was because I swung my crutch hard and slammed it into the coffee table between us. It startled him long enough for my dad to drag him back. Aaron shouted, "You ruined my life. You think I'm just going to let that go? You think this is over?" My parents rushed to him, coddling, soothing, shushing, while I stood there shaking so hard my crutches rattled. But then, in the middle of his screaming, Aaron said something that hit me harder than anything he'd thrown so far. "I should have taken your car too. You don't even know what I did with it while you were gone." My stomach dropped. I felt cold. "What are you talking about?" I asked. He smirked. "Figure it out." That smirk, gloating, taunting, full of the same arrogance that had gotten him into this mess, told me everything. Aaron hadn't just stolen my money. He hadn't just sold my dog. He hadn't just thrown away my journals. He'd done something else, something bigger, something I didn't see coming. And the moment I realized that, I understood the stakes were much higher than I thought. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my brother's smirk replayed in my head, taunting, smug, like he still had cards he thought I'd never find. Something about my car, something he'd done while I was in the hospital, something he thought would break me. By sunrise, my body hurt so badly I could barely move, but I pushed myself upright. Pain didn't matter anymore. Fear didn't matter. I felt this cold determination settle into my bones, steady, sharp, almost surgical. If Aaron thought the email was the end of what I could do to him, he hadn't learned a damn thing about me. I waited until both of my parents left for errands, and Aaron disappeared into my old room to lift weights and blast music. Then I went outside to the driveway and walked around my car slowly. Nothing looked off, at least from the outside. No dents, no vandalism, no slashed tires, but Aaron's smirk kept echoing in my head. "You don't even know what I did with it." So I looked inside. At first glance, everything seemed normal. But then I opened the glove compartment. Empty, completely empty. Every document, registration, title copy, insurance papers gone. My stomach tightened. I limped back inside and dug through my backpack for the small folder where I kept spare copies. Also gone. That was when I knew this went deeper than I thought. I went back to my car and checked the trunk. And there it was, the first real clue, a faint chemical smell. Sharp, bitter, a smell I knew from the hospital. Medical waste disposal bags. Not mine, not from anything related to me. And they were tucked underneath the trunk lining like someone hid them in a panic. My heart pounded. I kept digging, slow, careful, methodical. I found latex gloves. I found empty prescription bottles with someone else's name scraped off. I found a box of syringes, unused but open. I found a folded piece of paper with addresses written on it. 3 addresses. All in Tacoma. One I recognized as a clinic. The other 2 were random houses. A cold chill slid down my spine. Whatever Aaron had been using my car for, it wasn't just stealing from work. I sat down on the curb, breathing hard, trying not to spiral. I couldn't jump to conclusions, not yet, but none of this pointed to anything innocent. And the fact that he used my car meant he wanted distance between himself and whatever he was involved in. Or he wanted someone else to take the fall. Someone who had been in the hospital for months. Someone who couldn't defend themselves. Someone he assumed was too weak to uncover the truth. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. Every glove, every syringe, every scribbled address. I documented every angle. Then I zipped everything into a trash bag and hid it under the porch. If Aaron realized I'd found it, he'd blow up before I could use any of it. That afternoon, as he stomped around the house ranting about his job investigation, I stayed quiet. I let him think he'd scared me into backing down. I let him think he still had the power. Meanwhile, I made a list. A very specific, very ruthless list. Find out what the addresses were. Figure out where he sold Milo. Pull banking records and prove the disability theft. Send the trunk evidence to the right people, not his employer this time, but someone with actual teeth. Trap him with his own arrogance. Every step was precise, calculated. Designed not just to expose him, but to make sure he could never twist the story, never blame me, never escape the consequences. I had spent my whole life being the quiet one, the forgiving one, the one who kept the peace. But that version of me died in the hospital. This version was done being erased. And Aaron had no idea that the thing he'd been hiding, the thing he thought made him untouchable, was about to become the weapon I used to take him down completely. I spent the next day quietly gathering proof, pretending to be small and rattled, while my brother stomped around the house calling lawyers he couldn't afford and coworkers who wouldn't call him back. The panic in his voice got sharper every hour, but the more he spiraled, the more focused I became. I started with the addresses I found in the trunk. I didn't have the strength to drive all over Tacoma, so I searched what I could online and called around anonymously. The clinic was easy. It was a pain management place with a reputation for looking the other way if you showed up with cash. The second address led to a rundown duplex near 6th Ave. Nothing suspicious on the surface. But the third address, that was the one that shifted everything. When I called the number listed for the property manager, a tired-sounding woman answered. I asked, casual, polite, if she knew anything about someone using the house whose name started with A. She sighed immediately, the kind of sigh that comes from being burned too many times. "That tenant already caused me enough trouble," she said. "If you're calling about the break-ins, talk to Tacoma PD. Break-ins, plural. I froze. Break-ins as in someone broke into the house. No, she said. Someone who lived there broke into other units. A pause. Wait, who are you? I hung up before she could ask more. My hands shook. Break-ins, syringes, stolen medical waste, fake prescriptions. My car being used as the getaway vehicle. All while I was unconscious in a hospital bed, hooked to machines, fighting my way back to life. Aaron wasn't just stealing from his job. He wasn't just selling my dog. He wasn't just draining my disability money. He was doing something criminal enough that he needed to use my identity and my car to keep himself clean. I needed more details. Hard details. So I contacted the one person I never thought I'd reach out to again. My ex, Jordan. We hadn't talked in over a year, not since we broke up over something stupid that seems microscopic now. But Jordan worked at a rehab center and had connections in areas I didn't. When Jordan answered the phone, I almost cried. Not from sadness, from finally talking to someone who didn't treat me like I was disposable. "What's going on?" Jordan asked immediately. "You sound scared." So I told them everything. Not the emotional parts, there wasn't time, but the facts. The car, the syringes, the addresses. The suspicion something much worse was happening. Jordan went silent in the way they did when they were connecting dots. "Those addresses," they said. "They're on the route of a pill ring that keeps getting raided. The cops can't pin down the supplier." My skin prickled. "Aaron, I'm not saying he's the supplier," Jordan replied, "but he might be one of the runners. They use medical waste and fake prescriptions to shuffle opioids between clinics and drop houses. If he used your car, you need to be careful. You might be on a list." I felt the room tilt. A list, me. Tied to something I didn't even know existed. Jordan must have heard the panic in my breathing. "Listen," they said gently. "If he used your car, it means he didn't want it tied back to him. Which also means he planned to let me take the fall," I whispered. Silence. Heavy, confirming. It wasn't just selfishness. It wasn't just cruelty. It wasn't just him being the golden child who got away with everything. He had set me up. Intentionally. Strategically. Coldly. And that was when the second twist hit fully. Not only was my brother involved in something way darker than I imagined, he had been preparing to sacrifice me for it. Not in a metaphorical sense, not emotionally. He was building a paper trail, a car trail, a digital trail, all pointing to me. And he'd done it while I was strapped to a hospital bed, half alive, unable to defend myself. My revenge plan wasn't just justified now. It wasn't even about revenge anymore. It was survival. Jordan's words stayed in my head long after we hung up. He was building a trail that points to you. It didn't feel real at first. It felt like something out of a nightmare, like I'd wake up and realize my brother was just a selfish jerk, not a calculating one. Not someone capable of destroying my entire life on purpose. But the more I replayed everything he'd done over the years, the more it added up, not to incompetence, not to impulsive anger, but to something colder. A pattern, a strategy. A long, quiet history of him making sure I took the fall so he never had to face consequences. And that night, when the house was dark and the only sound was the occasional clank of him moving weights in what used to be my room, I finally understood the truth. The real truth, the part that chilled me to my core. I walked past the gym room door to grab water and I heard him talking on speakerphone, not yelling, not panicking, just talking. Calm, focused, professional. Like the person on the other end wasn't a friend or coworker, like this was business. I paused, quiet as I could, and listened. "Look," Aaron said, "I still have access to the car. The paperwork is already switched. If they trace anything, it doesn't come back to me. You said you needed someone clean, right? Someone with no record." My heart stopped. He continued, lowering his voice but not enough. "Yeah, she's too weak to do anything. The accident messed her up. She won't fight back. And if anything happens, she's the one who was driving all those months. Not me, she can't prove otherwise." A pause, a low laugh. The kind of laugh that made my stomach twist. "Yeah, I know. It's perfect." I felt sick. I felt cold in a way I didn't think a human could feel, because this wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This wasn't him losing his temper. This wasn't family conflict. This was premeditated. The next thing he said cemented everything. "It's not personal," he said. "I just can't go down for this. I've worked too hard. She already screwed up her life. What's one more thing? She'll survive, or she won't. Either way, I'm covered." Covered. He said it casually. Like my freedom, my future, my life were just variables he'd balanced in some private equation. I backed away from the door before I collapsed. My legs shook so badly the crutches felt useless. I made it to the couch and just sat there, staring into nothing. He wasn't doing this because he hated me. He wasn't doing this because he lost control. He wasn't doing this because he wanted my dog or my room or my money. He was doing this because he needed a shield, a scapegoat, a convenient body. To him, I wasn't a sibling. I wasn't even a person. I was a buffer, a backup plan. A place to dump consequences that were closing in on him. He knew the investigation from his employer was coming. He knew the cops were sniffing around that pill ring. He knew the walls were tightening. And he had already chosen who would take the hit for him. Me. Why? Because I was easy to erase. Because I had no one. Because a disabled sister recovering from a traumatic accident was the perfect person to pin suspicious behavior on. Because he was banking on me being too weak, too tired, and too alone to fight back. Because deep down, Aaron truly believed something terrifying. My life mattered less than his reputation. When that sank in, when the full weight of that realization hit, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I went calm. Ice cold calm. Because now I knew exactly what I was fighting. Not a bully, not a selfish brother, not a spoiled golden child. But someone who had always been willing to sacrifice me if it kept him clean. And I wasn't going to let him walk away from that. Part 8. Revenge/resolution, approximately 550-600 words. The thing about clarity, the real kind, is that once it hits, it doesn't let go. I woke up the next morning with a kind of focus I hadn't felt since before the accident. My brother thought he had me cornered. He thought he'd built a trap tight enough that I wouldn't be able to slip out of it. What he didn't realize was that he'd gotten sloppy. Arrogant, predictable. He'd left evidence everywhere. I started by backing up every single photo and document to 3 separate places: Jordan's email, a cloud drive, and a locked folder on my phone. Then I forwarded Jordan the full collection of what I'd gathered from my car. They told me they knew someone who could get it into the right hands, quietly and fast. Next, I printed everything and sealed it in an envelope. Then I waited. Around 10 a.m., Aaron stormed downstairs, a hurricane in human form. "They're trying to pin the whole thing on me," he snarled. "My boss said the union rep can't protect me if the cops get involved." I didn't look up from the envelope. "Sounds tough," he froze. "What did you say?" I lifted my eyes, calm. "I said it sounds tough." He stepped closer, the same way someone might approach a dog they're about to kick. "You think you're clever. You think emailing my boss makes you some kind of hero." "No," I said. "I think it makes me someone who's done being your cover." His expression twitched, uncertain for half a second, before the anger surged again. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said softly. "You are." Right then, the doorbell rang. Aaron stiffened. My mother called out that she'd get it, but I was already moving down the hall. When I opened the door, 2 Tacoma police officers were standing on the porch. Not angry, not loud, just professional. "Is this your vehicle?" one asked, showing me a printed photo of my car. "Yes," I said. "And I'd like to report evidence tampering, identity misuse, and illegal activity connected to it." Behind me, Aaron's voice cracked. "What the hell did you do?" I didn't turn around. I simply held out the envelope. "Everything is in here. Photos, items found in the trunk, documentation of stolen medical supplies, addresses connected to criminal activity." My brother rushed forward like he was going to grab the envelope out of my hands, but the officers stepped in immediately. "Sir, you need to back up." "Those aren't hers," Aaron shouted. "She's lying. She's doing this because she hates me." The officer raised a quieting hand. "We'll review all evidence." I finally turned toward Aaron. He looked small for the first time in his life. Small and scared and exposed. "You used my car," I said. "You switched my paperwork. You planned to make me take the fall." His mouth opened and closed, panic swallowing every excuse he tried to form. "You don't understand." "No," I said. "I finally do." The officers asked him to sit in the living room while they looked through the evidence. My parents hovered, shell-shocked. My mother whispered, "Why would you do this to your brother?" I faced her fully. "He was going to let me go to prison so he wouldn't have to." Her face froze. My father sat down like the weight of everything had crushed him. 20 minutes later, the officers placed Aaron in handcuffs. Not dramatic, not loud, just procedural. "Sir, you are being detained for questioning related to theft, prescription fraud, and unlawful possession of medical supplies." My brother looked at me like I'd stabbed him. "You ruined my life," he whispered. "No," I said. "You did." When they took him out, the house felt impossibly quiet. My parents didn't speak. They didn't look at me. And for once, I didn't care. 3 days later, Jordan picked me up. I moved out permanently. The police called to confirm that I was cleared of any suspicion and that everything pointed directly to Aaron. A week after that, I found Milo. Aaron had sold him to a backyard breeder. It took money and help, but I got him back. He recognized me immediately. He cried. I did too. I'm still healing, physically, mentally, all of it. But I have Milo. I have my own place. And I don't have to live in fear of someone who is willing to erase me to save himself. Sometimes revenge isn't about rage. Sometimes it's about finally choosing yourself. And in the end, that's exactly what I did.